At just 17, Mackenzie Cowell had her whole life ahead of her. Beauty school, friends, big dreams. But one February afternoon, she walked out of class for a short break and vanished. 4 days later, a discovery in the woods revealed a truth darker than anyone could imagine. Welcome back to Chilling Fireside Stories, where I tell real-life crimes with the utmost care and respect for the victims and bearable for my community. These cases deserve to be remembered. Now, settle in and let's begin. Mackenzie Cowell was born on April 1, 1992, in Moses Lake, Washington. At 17, she lived in Wenatchee, dividing her time between Wendy, her mother's, and Reed, her father's homes. She was weeks away from graduating high school and already pursuing her dream of becoming a hairstylist, enrolled in the Wenatchee Academy of Hair Design to earn extra school credits. But Mackenzie wasn't just focused on her future, she was deeply involved in the present. She danced with her school's performance team, the Applettes, lighting up parades and festivals with her energy and grace. Her father, Reed, often spoke of her determination. She'd start her day before sunrise and wouldn't return until late evening, juggling school, dance, modeling, and cosmetology training. Mackenzie was in a relationship with Joaquin Villazano, and the two were inseparable. Life was unfolding beautifully for her, and everything seemed to be falling into place. Until February 9, 2010. That evening, Reed had planned a quiet dinner at home with his daughter, a chance to catch up, share a meal, and enjoy their weekly tradition. He knew her classes ended at 5 p.m., but she didn't call to say she was on her way. 40 minutes passed, then an hour, still no contact. Reed tried her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He later said his stomach dropped the moment he realized something wasn't right. Just before the family could call the police called them. Mackenzie's car, an older model that Reed had passed down to her, had been found abandoned in Pitcher Canyon, miles from the beauty school. Reed confirmed she'd been driving it that day, but the officer said there was no sign of anyone nearby. He anxiously rushed to the scene. The location was remote, twisting roads, no streetlights, and no reason for Mackenzie to be there. Her vehicle was locked. Inside, they saw her purse and some clothing, but her keys, phone, and bank cards were missing. In the snow, just one set of footprints led away from the car. It appeared only one person had been inside when it was left there. The search for Mackenzie Cowell had begun. Reed later described that night as long, dark, and evil. Local news stations issued urgent bulletins. Detectives in Chelan County asked the public for help locating the missing teen. Search teams scoured the steep terrain around Pitcher Canyon, on foot, by air, and with bloodhounds. But nothing turned up. The Washington State Crime Lab processed her vehicle and found no obvious signs of foul play. Mackenzie was officially listed as an endangered missing person, but her case didn't meet the criteria for an Amber Alert. By that night, 5 FBI agents and 7 detectives were working the case. And what made it all the more haunting was that Mackenzie Cowell wasn't the kind of teenager who vanished without reason. She was a good student, smart, and deeply involved in her community. She danced, she modeled, she studied hard. And Wenatchee wasn't a place known for violent crimes against children. Her disappearance didn't fit the pattern, and that's what made it all the more alarming. Standing 5'8", Mackenzie had brown eyes, brown hair, braces, and both ears pierced. At that point, no suspect had been identified, but officials warned parents to stay alert. Until they knew what had happened, no one could be certain. Back at the Beauty Academy, detectives reviewed surveillance footage. Mackenzie had told classmates she was stepping out for a quick 15-minute break and asked if she needed to sign out. At 3 p.m., cameras captured her walking out the back door. She didn't say where she was going, and no one thought much of it at the time. At 3:42 p.m., she sent a casual text to her boyfriend, "Hey, what's up?" He replied. But after that, her phone went silent. That message would be the last known activity from her device. Her debit card had only about $20 on it, used for small purchases. But in the days following her disappearance, there was no activity. Nothing. Then came witness reports. 3 residents said they'd seen a tall, slim white man with very dark hair and a long coat walking down the road where Mackenzie's car had been abandoned. The sightings occurred between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m. Investigators began combing through Mackenzie's phone records. They also obtained warrants for her social media accounts, including Facebook and MySpace. One reporter noted that from the very beginning, something felt off. Police never treated this as a runaway case. It was clear, something darker was unfolding. Flyers were posted across Wenatchee, urging anyone who recognized her or her vehicle to come forward. Then, everything changed.
Checking news now, there's new information this morning in the case of Mackenzie Cowell, a 17-year-old girl who police say was murdered.
Her body was found along the Columbia River on Saturday. Mackenzie had been missing since Tuesday when she left her beauty school in Wenatchee. KXY4's McKay Allen is live in the newsroom this morning. McKay, what's that new information that you've got?
Well, the Wenatchee World is reporting that there is surveillance video of Mackenzie leaving her hair school at 3:30 on Tuesday afternoon. She gets in her car and drives off. No one followed her and she didn't appear to be in a hurry. Everything seemed normal. That's the last known sighting of Mackenzie. Mackenzie Cowell was only 17 years old, from the town of Orondo in Douglas County. She disappeared on that Tuesday. That same day, about 10 at night, officials found her car parked up a remote canyon road in Chelan County. Her purse and clothes were in the car. Then Saturday, after days of searching, some people walking along the Columbia River's bank found the girl's body at Crescent Bar. Now the entire area is in shock and in fear.
I would say simply to the young women in the area, a little discretion and keeping your eyes open goes a long way towards safety.
The Douglas County Sheriff says the county is still a very safe place to live and doesn't believe there's an immediate threat to other young women in the area. But today, investigators are continuing to pour over a 500 by 500 yard area around where Mackenzie's body was found, including an abandoned house. They told us they found evidence in that house yesterday, but wouldn't say what. Police say they believe Mackenzie was killed near where her body was found.
She was still wearing her beauty school uniform. Investigators didn't yet know where she had been killed, but they hoped the autopsy and crime scene analysis would offer answers. The autopsy revealed that Mackenzie had been beaten, stabbed, and strangled. There were no signs of drugs, alcohol, or sexual assault, but there had been an attempt to sever her arm after death, as a serrated knife was still lodged in her shoulder. Near Mackenzie's body, investigators found duct tape, one of several unsettling details that deepened the mystery. Dive teams returned to the waters surrounding Crescent Bar, combing the entire resort area in search of additional evidence. Authorities couldn't say whether Mackenzie's killer was someone she knew or a complete stranger. As word spread through Wenatchee High School, students shared messages of heartbreak and hope. They prayed for answers. They prayed for justice. A memorial service was held soon after. More than 1,800 people gathered to honor Mackenzie's life, a powerful show of love and grief from a community shaken to its core. Though devastated, they were united in their determination to find the person responsible. The FBI stepped in, joining the investigation with full force, and a dedicated task force was assembled, drawing resources from across the region. And as is often the case in crimes like this, detectives began by looking closely at those who had been nearest to Mackenzie in life. Her boyfriend Joaquin and her mother's partner Joey were both questioned early on. Her parents, however, were never considered suspects. Joaquin agreed to take a polygraph test but reportedly failed one question: "Do you know who killed Mackenzie?" He later said he had no idea who was responsible, not even a hunch. He was shaken, distressed, and clearly not himself. Joey, too, was scrutinized. There had been reports of an argument between him and Mackenzie the day before she disappeared. But both men were ultimately ruled out. With those leads exhausted, investigators widened their search. Then came a tip from someone on the fringes of the community, a former drug dealer and addict-turned-police informant named Liz Reed. Her story was disturbing. She claimed Mackenzie had been murdered in a case of mistaken identity, and that two local drug dealers, Sam and Emmanuel, were responsible. Liz said she'd seen a video of the killing. Liz described the murder weapon in detail, before even that information had been made public. She also handed over a ring, claiming it belonged to Mackenzie and that Emmanuel had sent her to retrieve it from the scene. But the location she described didn't match where Mackenzie's body had been found. And no one in Mackenzie's life recognized the ring. Police investigated the two men thoroughly. Phone records and employer statements confirmed their alibis. Emmanuel, who had been working to rebuild his life and care for his young son, said the accusation had set him back in ways he couldn't have imagined. Despite extensive efforts, no video was ever found. Liz's credibility began to unravel. She eventually recanted her statement, though she continued to insist she had seen the footage. She said she withdrew out of fear, worried the police might turn their focus on her, even though they had never suggested such a thing. With that lead collapsing, the investigation pressed on. Over the next 7 months, detectives followed hundreds of leads and interviewed more than 800 people. The process was painstaking, slow, and relentless. Then, Mackenzie's mother broke her silence. For more than 3 months, she had stayed quiet, at the request of investigators who wanted to protect the integrity of the case. But now, with no suspects and no resolution, she spoke publicly for the first time.
It's important to my family and I for you to bring that person forward.
Then, a new name surfaced. From inside a prison cell, another informant, Theo Keyes, sent detectives a letter. He urged them to look into a man he once knew, 29-year-old Christopher Wilson. Theo described a disturbing incident at a party where Chris had suddenly begun choking a female friend, then let go and acted as if nothing had happened. He also noted that Chris had attended the same beauty academy as Mackenzie and lived just blocks from the school. Others who knew Chris described him as quiet, polite, but undeniably strange. The deeper investigators looked, the more unsettling the picture became. Chris had a fascination with death, serial killers, and mortuary work. He idolized the TV show Dexter, and had a tattoo of Hannibal Lecter on his arm. He had worked at several funeral homes in the area. One student at the academy recalled Chris saying he enjoyed cutting into bodies while working in the mortuary. Another person recalled Chris telling her he had once strangled a hotel guest with a belt. It was a disturbing claim, one of many that began to surface. But those closest to him painted a different picture. His mother insisted that being different didn't make someone dangerous. His best friend echoed that sentiment, describing Chris as kind, generous, and misunderstood. He wasn't perfect, they said, but he wasn't a monster. Chris stood out in Wenatchee. His long jet black hair, tattoos, and vintage clothing made him visually distinct in a town where conformity was the norm. But being eccentric, they argued, wasn't a crime. Still, the description given by 3 separate witnesses of a slim man walking near the area where Mackenzie's car was found closely matched Chris. He had been at the beauty academy the same day Mackenzie disappeared, and surveillance footage showed him leaving through the same back door, less than 2 minutes after she did. But after that, his whereabouts were unclear. He sent a few texts to his ex-girlfriend, but no one could confirm seeing him. Chris had no confirmed alibi for the day Mackenzie vanished. He'd never been in trouble with the law before, and when questioned, he insisted he didn't know her, said she was just another face at the academy. Calmly, he offered a DNA swab without hesitation. On the surface, he seemed cooperative, and that's when everything shifted. His DNA matched a sample found on duct tape near Mackenzie's body. Given how remote the location was, investigators found it hard to believe this was a coincidence. When investigators asked Chris if he'd ever been near Crescent Bar, he said no, he had no reason to go there. But when they revealed that his DNA had been found on duct tape near Mackenzie's body, Chris didn't offer an explanation and he simply asked for a lawyer, and just like that, the interview was over. Now, investigators began connecting dots with Chris's obsession with the show Dexter, a fictional series about a forensic expert who kills and dismembers criminals, suddenly felt more relevant. Mackenzie's body had shown signs of an attempted dismemberment. It was enough for police to place Chris under arrest on suspicion of second-degree murder. When they told him, he simply stared. News of his arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Though Chris and Mackenzie weren't known to be close and didn't appear connected on social media, he had attended her memorial service. He'd even comforted her grieving friends. For many, that detail felt unsettling. Those who knew Chris were stunned. Relief rippled through the town, but it was laced with disbelief. Could this quiet, eccentric man really be responsible? At the time of Mackenzie's disappearance, Chris had been living just 3 blocks from the Academy of Hair Design, in a modest unit at the Burke Hill Apartments. That location would soon take on new significance. Though Chris had moved out by the time of his arrest, police subpoenaed cell phone records from Verizon. The data showed that Mackenzie's phone had sent and received transmissions between 3 o'clock and 3:42 p.m. on the day she vanished, from the area surrounding Burke Hill. Investigators couldn't say for certain if Mackenzie had simply driven past, parked nearby, or actually stepped inside Chris's apartment, but the proximity was impossible to ignore. Although Chris had already moved out and the apartment had been thoroughly cleaned, investigators moved quickly to search the unit, hoping that some trace of evidence had somehow been left behind. Inside Chris Wilson's former apartment, investigators were searching for anything, no matter how small, that might link him to Mackenzie's disappearance. The place had been cleaned, but forensic experts brought in luminol, a chemical that reacts to even the faintest traces of blood. In the main room, a soft glow appeared, a small, discolored patch on the carpet. It wasn't obvious, just a subtle whisper beneath the surface. They cut out the square and lifted the padding underneath. That's when the reaction intensified. Whatever had happened there hadn't been fully erased. Blood had soaked through. And when the sample was tested, the results were unmistakable. It was Mackenzie Cowell's. It was, by far, the strongest physical evidence investigators had uncovered. And it placed Mackenzie inside Chris Wilson's apartment. Phone records showed no calls or texts between the two. Still, classmates recalled that Chris and Mackenzie had recently begun talking. One even suggested Chris may have been interested in her. Then came the digital trail. On Chris's computer, investigators found searches about serial killers and posts on forums dedicated to the topic. It wasn't illegal, but it was unsettling. The portrait of Chris Wilson was growing darker. And then, a breakthrough. Tessa Marie Schulman, an ex-girlfriend of Chris's, was brought in for questioning.
Made a second arrest in connection with the Mackenzie Cowell murder case. The 17-year-old disappeared in February after leaving beauty school. Her body was later discovered dumped by a river. Chris Wilson was arrested and charged with her murder. Now, 22-year-old Tessa Maria Skyleman was arrested in connection with this case. KXLY4's Tanya Dahl is live in our newsroom with the story. And Tanya, this case is taking yet another strange twist.
Yeah, when Wilson was arrested, it seemed like a cut and dry case, but detectives stumbled across pictures of Skyleman posing where Mackenzie was killed. The Wenatchee Police Department arrested the 22-year-old last night, charging her with rendering criminal assistance and obstructing the investigation into Mackenzie's murder. Police say Skyleman was close friends with Wilson. Detectives found pictures of her posing as a dead person on the floor of Wilson's apartment where Mackenzie was killed, and in the exact spot where detectives would later find the teen's blood. A search warrant also uncovered 2 cell phone videos of Skyleman walking through the same apartment, zooming in on areas where detectives found Mackenzie's DNA. Police say in one video, Wilson can be heard asking Skyleman if the apartment is clean. During the Mackenzie investigation, Skyleman claimed to have no knowledge of what happened to the Wenatchee teen. Detectives say she has posted bond.
2 videos found on her phone would become pivotal. The first, recorded on June 26th, showed Chris and Tessa entering his apartment. They moved a coffee table aside, and the camera focused on a large brown stain on the carpet, something police later said resembled dried blood. The second video, taken 4 days later, showed Chris walking through the apartment, filming each room. He was preparing to move out, hoping to reclaim his security deposit. As the camera panned across the carpet, Chris could be heard asking, "Is it clean?" Tessa responded, "Yes." But she never clarified what it referred to.
Video me, just get away. Is it clean? Does it look clean?
Clean for what happening? Clean considering? Yeah, it's clean considering.
That stained patch, slightly discolored, easily missed, was the same spot where luminol had revealed Mackenzie's blood. And there was more. On Chris's computer, investigators found photos of Tessa lying on the floor of the apartment, posed as if she were dead. Her body positioned in the same spot as the stain. Chris claimed the stain came from a tipped-over bong. He said the water had discolored the carpet and left a foul smell, which he tried to clean using simple green. Later on in court, his defense team went further, suggesting that Mackenzie's blood had been planted by police. Phone records showed that she and Chris had spoken at 3:32 p.m. on the day Mackenzie disappeared. That call came just 30 minutes after both Chris and Mackenzie had left the academy, separately. It was also during class hours, when Chris should have been in session. Later that evening, Chris reached out to Tessa 5 more times. He borrowed her car, even though his own black 1991 Volkswagen was still in working condition. That same vehicle would later turn up in an impound lot in a nearby city. Around 9 p.m. that night, Tessa called her boyfriend. She sounded shaken. "Pray for me," she said. "Something bad happened." The two of them lived near Crescent Bar, and whatever she was referring to, it seemed to weigh heavily on her. Tessa was later arrested and charged with rendering criminal assistance in Mackenzie's murder. Her white Subaru Legacy was impounded and searched. Investigators swabbed stains inside the vehicle, found a knife under the seat, and collected 3 Camel cigarette butts. They tested the DNA against a cigarette butt found near Mackenzie's body, but no matches were found. Still, the physical and circumstantial evidence against Chris Wilson was mounting. Prosecutors charged him with second-degree murder. Their theory was that Chris and Mackenzie had left the academy separately, but met at his apartment. Whether it was a romantic rendezvous or something else entirely, they alleged that Chris struck her, strangled her, and stabbed her, then cleaned the scene to hide the evidence. He then moved her body to Crescent Bar and abandoned her car in Pitcher Canyon. Chris maintained his innocence and hired a high-profile defense attorney, John Henry Brown. Based in Seattle, Brown had defended notorious figures like serial killer Ted Bundy and the barefoot bandit, Colton Harrismore. He was no stranger to Wenatchee's courtrooms, having previously won cases during the infamous Wenatchee witch hunt. The defense argued that the blood in Chris's apartment had been planted, and if a murder had occurred there, the stain would have been far larger than the faint trace found. Brown also secured permission to reintroduce Liz Reed's testimony, reviving the possibility that Samuel Cuevas and Emmanuel Serros were the true perpetrators. Chris's mother, Kathleen Sorens, testified that her son had been with her that afternoon, picking up cupcakes for an upcoming event. Brown and co-counsel Emma Scanlon emphasized that no smoking gun had been found, no direct evidence linking Chris to the murder. Despite the defense's efforts, prosecutors felt confident. They upgraded the charge to first-degree murder, citing premeditation. If convicted, Chris faced up to 26 years in prison, so they offered Chris a plea deal, reduced the charge to first-degree manslaughter with a sentence of 6.5 years. He refused, holding firm to his plea of not guilty. Then, just as the trial was about to begin, he changed his mind and asked to accept the 6-year deal. He said surveys of potential jurors showed most already believed he was guilty and feared the trial would be unfair. But by then, the original offer was off the table. Then came another plea deal, this time with heavier charges and a longer sentence. Under the advice of his attorney, Chris Wilson accepted. He pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter in the death of Mackenzie Cowell, first-degree robbery for stealing her phone and debit card, and second-degree assault for the act of choking. Chris Wilson was sentenced to 14 years and 3 months in prison. As part of the plea agreement, he was required to sign a document admitting to the crimes and to verbally confirm each charge in court. When the judge read them aloud, Chris responded slowly, deliberately, saying he had committed the acts. But later, he would claim those words weren't a confession. He said he'd felt trapped, that he hadn't wanted to agree but saw no other way forward. Less than a year into his sentence, in 2013, Chris tried to take back his guilty plea, but the court denied the request. During his time at Clallam Bay Correction Center, a medium-security prison in northwestern Washington, he continued to insist he was innocent. He claimed he was pressured into accepting the plea deal, that he was railroaded by circumstance and perception. As for Tessa Schulman, the charges against her were eventually dropped. She changed her name and quietly left the area. By the end of 2023, Christopher Scott Wilson, now 43 years old, was released from prison after serving 11.5 years. Today, Mackenzie's bedroom remains untouched, a quiet time capsule of the life she left behind. For her family, stepping into that room is like stepping back into a simpler, less painful time. A day when Mackenzie would wake up, study, dance, chat with her boyfriend, and catch up with her parents. Her father, Reed, keeps a wind chime outside, and every time it moves, he hears her voice. It feels, he says, like she's still there, still talking, still laughing. "You are my special gift from God," he said. "You will never leave my heart. I can't believe how much I miss you." Thank you for watching today's tragic case. If Mackenzie's story touched you, and if you think the justice truly served, please leave a comment below and subscribe for more true stories like this. And until next time, stay safe and hold your loved ones close.